What's up? Welcome back. I'm John Stark from BackToMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic, and we're still at Tribeca. I'm doing Tribeca. Look at me. I'm fancy. Uh, so this is the world premiere of We Are Pat. It's a documentary about Pat and the cultural exploration of the character created basically by Julia Sweeney, but really by the writers of Saturday Night Live. But I mean, it's hers. I mean, it really would not be manifested if Julia Sweeney had not stepped into the role of Pat to begin with. And there's a lot to talk about here. I have some thoughts on the film, on the documentary, on things I liked about it, things I really liked about it, but also some things that I think could have been explored just a little bit more. Sadly, the film does not have audio description that I'm aware of. It's a documentary. This one could have used, it's a little bit less of a talking head and a little bit more of I could have used contextual. There are a lot of people who are interviewed. It's not like one through story, it's sort of like shared experiences. So I probably could have used some sort of reference just to keep track of everybody who's speaking. But I actually kind of picked up pretty much on Julia Sweeney and her voice when they brought her in. I think it's really cool for her to do the documentary. I think it kind of is pointless if she doesn't do it. It reminded me a lot of last year's Chasing Amy, where they talked about sort of the downstream effects of that film and its negative representation, but also how that film sort of does still inspire in its own weird way, which is kind of what this does. This film definitely, like, Pat is not the best representation in terms of queer culture, but at the same time, there's a whole bunch of people standing here going, but we also love Pat. like, like there are aspects of Pat that they think are like funny or bitingly satiric in nature, but admittedly problematic. So it's sort of a dissection of what works, what doesn't work, and perhaps what they could do today. Sort of they talk about um, like the main guys is sort of getting like a writer's room together of sort of transgender comedians and how they would write Pat sketches if they were the writers on SNL, which made me think like, why aren't they? Why don't we have? Do we have one? Like, seems kind of like it felt very weird for like Bowen Yang to be the first Asian American cast member, like that late stage in the game on Saturday Night Live, and it feels like we have so many underrepresented. I know we had what's her name, Molly, the non-binary cast member who left after like two. They were great. Sorry, they were great. I was so disappointed that they left. I had so much fun with them, and I thought they were going to go on and do great things. Uh, but did not stay with Saturday Night Live. Yeah, we gotta continue to fill gaps in, so that way it's just about having perspective in the writer's room. I think that's how you avoid having jokes that really don't age well and you look back on and go, oh my God, did we do that? Is not having the right voices in the room and also allowing them to sort of truly speak without sort of fear of, uh, you know, I don't know, backlash. When they say, I don't know that that's going to play well with the audience, you might end up getting, some hate on social media for that. So I think we're definitely at a place where this should be a thing either on the show or in the writer's room by now. Hopefully. Hint, hint, Lorne. Uh, there are plenty of them. And actually, one of my favorite parts of the movie was when they were sort of exploring like a whole wide subset of these transgender comics and like little bits of their stand-up. I was like, these are really funny jokes. These are admittedly hilarious jokes. And I love that they're able to sort of pick at their own culture and take that and use it, because there's so much of that is so much of stand-up comedy is expressing your own personal experiences on stage. And this documentary is a personal reflection of how this one character sort of influenced a generation that grew up with Pat. And actually, even though this movie has like a 2 point something on IMDb and an awful like critic score, there are people who loved this movie and went home and watched it and popped in the VHS or whatever. And it spoke to people, I guess, in a campy, cheesy way. Um, Admittedly, I haven't seen It's Pat. Admittedly, I'm sorry, I have not. The character was fine when I saw it as a kid. It just felt like I was maybe a little too young. It didn't quite work for me. I also haven't seen Stuart Saves the World. So I think a little bit down the line is when I started really hitting with Saturday Night Live. Uh, this is it's fun. It's fine. It's interesting. One of the things coming, I guess, from the LGBTQ perspective myself is I was thinking this is a great opportunity to talk about a little bit more of the Pat being non-binary before non-binary was a thing, which we do talk about a little bit, but then we immediately sort of co-opt the character into transgenderism, which is not really the point of Pat. The point isn't that Pat switched genders, or that Pat has like a different, gender identity necessarily. It's that Pat is sort of this amalgamation of both this like impossible to figure out just androgynous nature, which fits a lot with the non-binary community. So it almost would have made sense to come at it more from the perspective of that than it would have been from the transgender experience, even though it does stoke a lot of, I understand why we're doing it, because it stokes a lot of transgender fear that was happening in the 90s, a lot of anti-gay, which is not just a 90s thing, I mean, that's still happening today. So, and obviously anti-trans is just happening today, pronouns, I mean, this whole thing is still very relevant. So I think maybe that's the one thing that was missing, would have been just more stories from people who didn't even know what that word was, but they saw themselves in Pat. And it touches that a little bit. I think there was at least one person who spoke to that experience and was like, we didn't even have this word. And now this word has sort of entered the culture, entered the stream. But then it sort of becomes a focus on trans comics. And I kind of just wish there would have been just a little bit more focus on people who were sort of androgynous in nature and who were feeling that and who were feeling like they were stuck between genders at a time when there wasn't really a definition of that. It wasn't that they wanted to change genders. It was that they didn't feel like they had a gender option, which is when I've talked to people who are in my friend circle who identify as non-binary, that's always sort of what they've described to me as, is that it's either sort of a mixture of both or sort of not seeing yourself in either. The two ways that anybody's ever been able to sort of express to me their choice. Not that it's never like a sit down and like hardcore 60 minutes interview. It's always just like, oh, because mostly at this time, if you're old enough, if you're in my age range, you have people who have to like tell you that they are. And then you're like, oh, huh. So, and then they tell you, like, they're like, well, yes, this is how I felt but non-binary wasn't a thing. Now it is, but I've always sort of been this way. I've always felt like I'm in the middle. So, maybe a little bit of that. That's the only thing. Otherwise, I thought this was a really strong documentary. It reminded me, again, a lot of Chasing Amy, which I really liked, because it took something that was problematic and it sort of dissected it. It would boldly pointed out the things about it that worked in terms of speaking to a population that was heavily underrepresented at the time and was just seeking any kind of representation at all, even sort of negative, stereotypical ones. that had nothing to speak to at all. Um, and how that sat with people, and Julia sort of being able to reflect on Pat and the just sort of general masculinity in the room at the time of Saturday Night Live, and how women were typically written. So it's kind of refreshing to know that eventually Tina Fey would become the head writer, things would change. And when you really think about, not to say anything about the women of Saturday Night Live from the 80s and early 90s, but it wasn't until Lauren really started uh, giving those women's sort of representation in the writers' room, supported by Tina Fey, that we started getting that next generation of the Tina Fey, Kristen Wiig, Maya Rudolph, Amy Poehler, you know, just smarter characters who didn't have to be what Julia calls sort of shrill, uh, cartoonish women. So this is fun. I think you should see it. Uh, I just I would have had maybe just slightly more of a balanced representation between trans and non-binary, and had more people talking about it from the non-binary perspective. It's there. It's a little nitpicky thing, but I kind of felt like at the end that transgenderism won over non-binaryism, when it should be the other way around. Like, I don't mind that the other's here. It's an important conversation to have, and trans people absolutely can see themselves represented in Pat. But I think the stronger story is talking, because so many people don't understand why people would use they them pronouns. Um, and I think Pat is sort of the first representation of that, long before there was ever a word for them. So, yeah, I'm gonna go with an A minus. I'm gonna give We Are Pat an A minus. I don't think I was debilitated by the lack of audio description. I just would have liked to know who's speaking. So there isn't really much here. It's just a bunch of ideas being put together. Not a lot of not a lot of visuals, I should say. So I don't. Again, I only really do this with documentaries because I kind of know, I've kind of seen enough documentaries with audio description. Yes, everything should have audio description. Everything should be accessible to blind people at the fullest extent that it can be accessible. However, audio description for documentaries almost always sort of like the least. It's hard to get the most in there because people don't shut up. Like, if you had to try to audio describe this video, I haven't really stopped talking. So I don't know how much audio description there would be in this review of this. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I will see you guys on the other side.